this is possible. Hey, Diego.
Hey,
Hey, how you
Ben,
doing?
how's it going?
All right, good. How are
Hey,
you?
Enrique, nice to meet you.
Welcome to the podcast.
Wow, we're in outer space. Are you on the capsule?
I'm in, not really, but
Wish you were, right? Wish you were far away from all this
a
mess.
little bit.
I
I mean,
do.
you know, with all the things that are going on, it's a good place to be, I think. I am excited about all the expansion and and the idea of exploring new horizons. I think it could be an exciting thing. I think we get too centralized into ourselves, and it just becomes so overly concentrated, and I think we explode after a while. So I like that.
Didn't it bring a tear to your eye though that like at the like it was like NASA, the beautiful NASA logo, which has remained unchanged since like the 70s or 80s or whenever they made that, and then next to it it's like SpaceX. Like it's just like, why does this have to be like a public private partnership? Like, do we have to go in this direction as a people? Like, can't space exploration go in the direction of like pan globalist as opposed to like towards corporatist? You know, it's like
Yeah, no, I think that it's interesting because we didn't do anything for so long, and I think a lot of it has to do with the budgets are so expensive that I think, the taxpayer is pretty much just like, we don't want to go to space. There's people who are hungry, people who are homeless. We're not going to agree to allocate money to go to fucking space. So
yeah, but we don't
that's,
agree to bomb people and spend the majority on our military either, but we do it anyway, right? I think
Right.
that the point of going to space wasn't just to like pat the regular civilian like on their shoulder and be like, your dreams are valid. It was like built into another program of global conquest and PR and stuff like that. And like maybe that's what kind of dropped out, is like we no longer had to prove to everybody American superiority in that way. And we're still willing to spend billions of dollars on insane shit. It's not because people are going to be like, the homeless,
true.
no,
Yeah.
like don't send people
Right.
to space.
No, that's true. But now they were just letting somebody go and spend their money instead of the taxpayers' money. And I think at the end of the day, things don't work economically unless there's a way to generate revenue. So as private companies
Right.
said, hey, we got a plan. We can figure out how to generate revenue. There's going to be people that will pay for all the stuff that we're doing. And the way that that SpaceX is actually funding all this is really interesting, because what they're doing is they're basically launching satellites into space in order to give third world countries free internet. So, well, I shouldn't say free. It's very low cost internet. So if you've got
For a small price.
That's right. It'd be hard to fund a space program on a free internet to the,
very, very low price internet. So this way, people who have no access to it at all are able to actually get communicated. I mean, I think 20% of the entire world's population is in the dark. So what SpaceX is doing is they're just basically turning on the lights and saying, hey, you guys can have internet, and it's going to be really difficult for governments to actually interfere and censor this stuff. Ultimately, it won't be impossible, but it's, the idea is that. So even if you're providing internet to approximately 2 billion people is what the potential is. And if 2 billion people pay $1 a month, then that's going to be able to fund a lot of interesting stuff. So I think it's really cool.
What do they get for that, investment? Do they get to like colonize like the moon or colonize Mars or get like a little space?
get a slice.
A little slice of a new planet?
I don't think so. No, I think that there's
I think so, actually.
There's a global treaty that basically said you can't own any part of the moon, for example.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Trump's going to revoke that shit. Trump's going to bam, stamp it out of existence.
That's right.
I don't think he can. I mean, there's a very limited amount the guy is a lunatic, but I don't think he's capable of
just pulled out of the Open Skies Treaty. The Open Skies Treaty, in a sense, was like a global agreement. It wasn't about shared space. It was about every country help each other to make sure that nobody could do sneaky moves on their sort of military movements and stuff like that. It was a global agreement. Hey, we've agreed that at least this part of strategy has to be balanced out. And it seems, it it's unbelievable to me how easy it seems to be to like just like change the situation with these agreements and to just be like, oh, you know what, I'm gonna like cancel this, because I always thought they were sort of written in stone. So I wonder if some of the things that we believe are sort of written in stone as sort of like global agreements are in the hands of a madman or increasing madmen throughout the world. And then the other things that, like, I mean, in 2020, I think it'd be silly to believe that any tech dreams about the future are really dreams, right? Every tech fantasy that we've seen so far about bringing people together and creating forums where open discussion is allowed and they're all nightmares, right? So it's like, if there's a tech guy in 2020 and he's trying to sell you a vision of like a tech fantasy of the future, I think it's about time we say, like, you know what, these tech guys have just deceived us on every single like tech utopian fantasy. Like, maybe it's time we like say, no, not exactly. We put this in the hands of something more accountable than a private corporation, you know?
Absolutely. I'm a little bit frightened of these social experiments that we're the guinea pigs for, that we find out 5-10 years later are destroying our lives and turning us into robots looking at our phones and our Facebook feeds 24/7.
It's freaking horrendous.
It's horrible.
You walk down the street.
It's not by accident. It's by design, you know?
Oh no, absolutely. Like right now. So I'm a aircraft pilot. So one of the things, like, and you actually have access, everybody has access to this, but if you go to airnav.com, for example, you can see where every single airplane is on the planet.
Oh, wow.
Just, it's available to everybody. And in that, you can hover over every single one of those little miniature airplanes. It tells you the tail number, the name of the airline, if it's an airline, if it's a private aircraft. Like if I'm flying around, you can find me there and just follow me to where I'm going. Every single person is totally tracked so long as they have their transponder on. Private airplanes, little tiny airplanes, medium-sized airplanes, commercial airplanes, every single thing is right on there. And when you look at this and you see the thousands and thousands of things that are flying around, it's like, holy shit, how do you even keep track of this? And it's right there. And right now with our phones, NSA, all kinds of government organizations are able to see exactly where we are. And it's not just the government, but the private companies are selling all this information to other private companies.
Yep. I was actually given a little monologue by some guy who said, oh, the people who leave your bar, they go down here the street to this other bar, and he can follow them and trace them and show me on this app exactly where people are going. I was like, this is frightening. I don't want to know this stuff.
Wait, who said that? That's crazy.
Some guy trying to sell me liquor was like, well, you should take you should take our brand because
good sell.
Yeah, it's a good
because I know where your people are going.
Exactly.
This,
they're trying to get this liquor at another bar, so you better stock us. And here, look at the people.
But wait, they actually showed, because I need to know the name of this app. What are you talking about? That's crazy.
Okay. He showed me the movement of our customers out of our bar and into other bars in the neighborhood.
What is the name of this app?
Oh God, I don't know. It was something that was proprietary for their.
Did you choke them out, tie them up, and put them in the basement? This guy, what are you doing?
It's using the same thing that you're talking about, the GPS.
Well, you can have heat maps, right? I mean, you can have like not anonymized heat maps that say like we can see that there's enough people using certain antennas within this area. Like it's not like, hey Ben, like Jimmy Joseph was at your bar and then he showed up at the bar across the street. Right. I'm sure it's a much more anonymized, like just, hey, look at this movement of these people. I'm hoping, unless it's like we've already crossed the threshold into the terrifying other world where everybody's being followed like actively with their names. It's like he had 2 drinks and then he went to that bar and he didn't tip the bartender.
I think that shit is actually happening, but it's happening like by government agencies, not liquor salesmen.
Yeah. Right.
I hope the liquor guy doesn't have granular information like that.
My personal opinion, like I'm like one of these people that I think like, you know, I'm not inherently distrustful of government. Like I'm much more distrustful of like corporations. I'd be willing to like, if we all agreed in a country, a small country, it doesn't have to be America, maybe not a paranoid country like America, that we would all just like, all our purchases and everything we consume would be uploaded to some government cloud. And then they would just tabulate it and figure out like Skittles cause cancer. Everybody stop eating Skittles. You know, like they would just be able to sort of figure out by our consumption, like everything. I'd be willing to do, you know, it's like, I don't mind. I'm
giving up some privacy for that.
Yeah. Cause I don't have I know that I only have the totalitarian like nightmare fantasy around people who I think have thought it through, who themselves have internalized the totalitarian mindset fantasy that they're out to get you, they're gonna manipulate you, etc. For the most part, I think like governments might not necessarily like turn into like a fascistic tool of control. I don't know. I think like there's other things that are more easily manipulated against us than like our geolocation, or I'm not sure. I'm still on the fence about this, but
I completely agree with that whole I don't know that I want the government knowing that if I buy Skittles, but I think just so you know, some of my background is 30 years ago, I founded a company that is, that basically provides raw materials. So it's a raw material company, and we're the anti-pharmaceutical organization. So we develop proprietary compounds for nutritional companies and for people to, do preventative maintenance on their bodies. I don't call it preventative medicine, but really go and expostulate these ideas about how to take care of yourself, how to, what to do to get away from just the hype from the media that tries to sell you things that are killing you. I think it was and I don't have every single one of these things perfectly lined up, but I think in 1950s, it was like one out of 50 people got cancer. Mm-hmm. And today we're approaching 1 out of 3.
Yeah, I think for women it's 1 out of 2.
Yeah, it's getting to the point of insanity, and I try to figure out, well, are we eating so much more garbage now than we did in the 80s? And the answer is probably not. But it's the food we ate in the 80s that's killing us today. So it doesn't.
It's probably a little bit of both. I think they've definitely like advanced food technologies in the last 20 years in ways that have introduced us to ways of processing ingredients that weren't available in the 80s. It's like, I do think that there's been technological advances in the front of making garbage food, right? It's not like they peaked at the 80s and then stopped. I think we are now consuming even more potentially toxic, carcinogenic food than we were in the 80s. But there is at least a countervailing influence of like, natural ingredients and some sense of knowledge about like, hey, let's not poison ourselves. But I think more like these petrochemicals, man. I think it's just petrochemicals. We surrounded ourselves with derivatives of the, petroleum compounds, and it's in everything. It's in our, armpits, in our eyeballs, it's in our stomachs, it's in our fish. It's like, it's everywhere. And you could probably chart like a preponderance of petrochemicals in water supplies and in body systems to the cancer rates. I think that's probably, and then, and then you have the weird outliers where some island in Sicily or off Sicily or whatever, everybody lives to 100 because they just eat olive oil. Like, what, are they not exposed to any of this stuff? Is it all diet? Like, I don't know. There's a lot of factors. Yeah, lifestyle, like loneliness. There's a lot going on.
Clean water and clean air. That's the main thing that we need in this world.
I think actually socialization is probably more, it's like, I think like people having strong communities and like loving each other and having like rituals that aren't about like, I'm going to peek out and get all my money and get the fuck out and chill. Like most of the long-lived societies in the world, people live and work until they're 90 something, and they got their 100 nephews that come to visit every, Buta Pazza day or whatever. They live for that. And they're like these decrepit old like creatures that in our society, totally driven by sort of like individualist enlightenment values, you'd be like, you should wish you were dead, man. You're like don't you see that you're a burden on everybody? Like, we hate having to come and visit you and wipe the drool off your face. And it's like, yeah, man, what am I? Like, I'm just like, everybody hates having to come visit me, and like they take their lives and euthanize themselves. Whereas in the rest of the world, they're just like, I'm a vegetable. People give me a peck on the cheek. I poop my diapers, and I'm like, I'm good to go for another 20 if that's what it takes. Give me my pack of like gitans or whatever,
We have a tremendously disposable mindset in these rich countries where we use something, and as soon as we get the half-life, it goes right in the garbage. And we do that with human beings too. It's horrible. Yeah. It's absolutely horrible. Yeah, I think that's a great example.
That's why the tech people need to be always like, I'm very suspicious of like somebody like Elon Musk, like should not be trusted, because he really does believe in that Silicon Valley vision of like disembodied humanity, and like the disembodied humanity is like the worst of humanity. It's like, I always think of the Milgram experiment where the person shocks the other person, you know, that famous experiment.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about like authoritarianism and the fact that people like respond to like people in uniforms. If the doctor says shock that patient, you should. It was also about like distance. It was that like, if the doctor was in another room, or if he was just a voice, the further the doctor was away from you, the less likely you were to respond to his instructions. And the closer the victim of the shocks was to you, also like the more likely you were to reject what the doctor was saying. So like, it was just a distance between a person and his victim, which allowed for this kind of like torturous behavior. And I think like the world of digital life is one where we're all like apart and we're all like angry at each other and we're just like have no empathy. And we're just, so I think like we should always be moving away from like techno fantasies. And I mean, definitely getting into like organic eating and farming and like feeling like the earth in your teeth and stuff like that. Like we should really granulate our lives as much as possible. It's a complicated thing. It's like we have to move toward like greatest sophistication to then find the way to find like sustainable like grubbiness, you know,
right,
like we're all like pull it back. We're all like going to the barber shop and like having to like shine our own shoes again and feeling joy in that, you know?
So has it been proven that the internet makes us miserable? I mean, haven't there been studies that show that people are greatly unhappy with their social media? And
I don't know that we need a study for that. I think it's pretty evident. Just people are not communicating anymore. They don't see each other.
Comments on YouTube videos.
Yeah, they're just, people are so connected to these devices, and I have this unwavering policy that I will not take out a phone in the company of another human being, and I've been that way for years.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
Yeah, I go out, and if I go out with a group of people and somebody is taking out their phone, I can be pretty, invasive and say, we're having dinner. I sat at a French restaurant in the West Village a few months ago, and I was with two people, and in the next table over, there was like a table for 12. Every single one of those people were just looking at their phone. And ironically, they were all Europeans. They're all speaking French. So I know that they were French, and they're just sitting there staring at their phones. And I think it's going to be debilitating, where their kids today in their 20s do not know how to talk to other people.
Yeah.
The whole idea of making a phone call is
anathema. It's amazing. I can't talk to any of our employees by phone. They will not answer the phone, and they're terrified when my voice comes over it. It's scary for me too. It freaks me out because of their fear. I'm like, oh.
But what do I do with you? When you send me a text message, what do? I'll give you one text message response. If you send a second one, the phone rings.
Yeah.
I can't sit there and do that, because also I have things to do. And I know I could wear earphones, and I can go about my day, and I can have somebody in my head.
And just put me in the background.
Well, you're not
just
really
put me in the fucking background.
No, you're not in the background. But I can, if I'm not, obviously there's certain limitations.
There's like a flattening of information, I think, that happened in the digital age, where we imagine that speech and text are actually interchangeable, right? Like they're all just information, right? So it's like, however it is you receive it, it should make a difference. But actually there's an enormous difference between a phone call and a text, right? You can have a long gap in a phone call, and a text message, you're like, what, did this person ghost me? Like, what's wrong with them?
Right.
There's all these things that we extend to each other. And the same is true like face to face. It's like, I imagine when the phone, I have a problem with texting. Everybody thinks I'm a little aggressive. Like I'm sort of like an aggressive texter, and I have anger issues, It's like it comes across in my text. But I imagine like telephones also had that, where like there were certain people that were just really nice in person, but on the telephone they just came off like fucking jerks, When the first telephones came out, they were like, dude, like what's wrong with you the other night? And it was like, what? We were just having a conversation. Like, you're like a fucking ass. And I think like the same, some generations are just very adept to it, and like, I'm sure there was a generation of parents who would see their teens on their phone. I mean, it was us. It was our generation. We'd be on the phone for like 6 hours upside down, not even saying anything.
Right,
and our parents are just like, what the fuck is wrong with these like debilitated creatures, And we're having the same. I'm very torn on this, like same as it ever was, or like we're really in a paradigm shift change, right? So it's like, people say like, oh, when the novel came out as a form of like media consumption, people were like, this is going to corrupt the youth. And then, you know, books came out, and then like comics came out, and then TV came out, and then radio came out. It's like every time we're just like, it's going to corrupt the youth. It's going to corrupt the youth. And like, maybe we should just like drop this idea that like the youth are so fragile that they're going to be like broken by the media experience that we have. On the other hand, like there are things about the world that we exist now that are really categorically different from anything that's ever existed, right? The whole idea that you're bullied 24 hours a day, you know, like if you're in school, like you can't get out of it. Like there are things that are, or like pornography, right? Like I can absorb just like infinite amounts of lewd material, whereas before you really had to struggle so much to see a boogie, you know, like that may
so
actually be a categorical difference and not just the kind of like continuous spectrum where we say like, hey, we're just suspicious of the next people down the line because it's foreign to us. You know, I'm still torn. I don't know, where do you guys stand? Same as it ever was, or like paradigmatic shifts, you know?
I think that right now we're dealing with a situation where we have to see if it's us or if it's the technology that's bothering us, because everybody needs to be able to have a choice. You were making a really good point about this whole thing about just getting more with the earth and growing our own food and farming and getting our hands dirty. And then, but when we adopt that kind of idea, then we might look at somebody else in a nice suit with the shiny shoes and then think they're living their life wrong. And what I feel is that everybody is living their life correctly so long as they're living their life and it's doing them good. So I think we need a world where some people have the shiny shoes and some people don't. I don't want to live in a world where nobody has shiny shoes, because that's not very interesting.
Yeah, but some people with the shiny shoes are taking the money out of the people that don't have the shiny, right? Like when you say Elon Musk is doing like all this stuff with private money, yes, it's private money because he amassed it, his shareholders amassed it, but that money, if we can be sort of frank about the history of American economy for the last 40 years, has pretty much been siphoned away from the middle class into an investor class, right? So it's like, it is the money it's the wealth of this country that's being invested, but it's being invested on behalf of like an individual and his goals and his corporate aims. Like there's a way of seeing the situation, I think, where you recognize like that there's a greater, like, there are no victimless systems with people with shiny shoes. Like people with shiny shoes means like there is a victim somewhere down the line. Somebody's paying the price for that shiny shoe.
Right. The guy with his hands dirty is usually paying the price for the guy
with his hands dirty is paying the price. I mean, I think like the question I think people should be asking is like, why?
I'm not sure how I feel about that particular idea.
Enrique,
that's a little prejudice.
I don't think it's prejudice to say that like wealth is generated and is generated off of the work of people. Whether that wealth is exploitative is one thing, right? Which I think like when you get to billionaire wealth, it most likely is exploitative. I mean, it'd be very hard to amass that kind of wealth without exploiting the work of the masses. You know, but I think like if we have to ask ourselves, like, is America a rich country, like, because it's so unequal? Like why do we have the greatest economy in the world? Is it a product of the fact that we've created a system where so many people are living desperately? Or is it because of the moxie of our great inventors and the Steve Jobs and Elon Musks of the world? Because I think it's most likely the former, in the same way that the greatness of most nations have been built on think of one great nation in the history of the world, one great empire, etc. And tell me it wasn't built on the exploitation of the people they were like destroying, like they all were. And American empire is the same.
I think we have to put it into context about, you know, the time in this, in the space, you know, that we're talking about. Right. You know, right now we're in the 21st century. We have a particular environment a construct that we're working under, and which is very different than the 16th century and the 12th century and so on and so forth. But for right now, I'll say that I definitely agree with a lot of these things, and they all make sense. I suppose we should check ourselves and be concerned with going over the top. So yes, I think that exploitation of people is definitely a real thing, but I don't want to categorically just rank everybody in that particular state, because I think that is a prejudice, and you know, I have to look at people that employ 600,000 people or 10,000 people as those who are doing, they're doing good, but it's never perfectly good. There's nobody that I know, including myself, that doesn't cause any harm at all. And I'm pretty tuned into the idea that that's like a goal of mine, but I know I'm never going to obtain it. Do no harm is definitely something that's
The Hippocratic Oath.
Yeah, just do no harm, and also give and build and construct. So it's a very difficult balance. You know, like Diego, what kind of work do you do?
I'm an artist, but these days I teach mostly, like after school programs for New York City teens. That's my primary source of income.
Okay. So, you know, Ben and I own restaurants and bars. And I am hyper aware that I'm feeding people alcohol. There's nothing good from that. Of course, might be, well, in my view, yeah. I think that there's something good about creating a great social environment where people come in and then they interact. And then I also make sure that I serve incredible food. So super hyper
what do you mean? You're doing a great thing. People need to come together and eat and drink.
I know. I'm just saying there's a combination. There's a lot of good and then there's some bad. Yeah. You know, so my point is it's very difficult to just live a life unless you just touch nothing and just do only good. So yeah, I try to, maybe I don't know if I call it overcompensating, but food is very important. So spend as much money as possible on the highest quality food. So then when people come in, they're getting something that's actually doing them good. Now, of course, alcohol is a social lubricant, so it makes the entire environment all that much better, and it makes it work as opposed to not having alcohol. But I'm definitely aware about some of the harm that something like that costs. Now, the whole idea of farming and getting your hands dirty is something that I love to do. I have got agricultural like ideas and programs that are in my background that I'm super enthusiastic about. And I also think that people need to be walking around without shoes. I know that's a complete obfuscation, but I was thinking about that before when you were mentioning the whole idea of, you know, get our hands dirty. I think that we need to start walking around barefoot a lot more because there's a magnetic resonance in the earth and we need to be in contact with it. We need to feel that soil on the bottoms of our feet. There's incredible amounts of nutrition under there. We need to get in there. I just don't want to go so far into an idea that I start condemning other people and their choices. I want everybody to have their choices. I want the people to wear the shiny shoes.
I know, Enrique. I'm not saying judge.
I'm not taking it literally.
I'm not saying like fuck the shiny shoe people. I'm just saying like the shiny shoe people are themselves restricting. I'm not saying all the shiny shoe people too. There's plenty of people that are engaged in, you know, small scale competition and entrepreneurship, and I'm all for them. I'm really sort of like thinking much more in terms of like global capitalism, Wall Street, the investor class. Like it's not like a person that's a good businessman. Like there's room for people who are good businessmen, but I do think that, you know, by saying like I don't want to like impinge on the freedom of those people, or I don't want to judge them, etc. Their way of life is impinging on the freedom of other people, and it is also judging them, because in a way it is creating a cultural value system which does devalue them. In the same way that we had cultural value systems that devalued women's work, we have cultural value systems which praise entrepreneurs and shit on nurses, you know what I'm saying, and shit on janitorial workers, and shit on people that I do believe contribute as significant. You know, it's like, as much as I love bar owners and restaurant owners, I do think like if they drop out of the earth and we have a society, and then we have a society where all the janitors drop out of the earth, one of them is going to be a much more dysfunctional society than the other, you know? And it's like,
we need everybody.
We need everybody. We know, I totally mean everybody. But I think like we should remember that the way that the scales are tipped right now is a form of cultural judgment, is a restriction of movement and freedom. You know, it's like, it's not like it's everybody's made their choice and the janitors are free to be janitors and the entrepreneurs are free to be entrepreneurs. There's systematic things that prevent the janitors from entering the entrepreneurial class. And I think like if we had a system, Enrique, where everybody had free mobility. Like I don't even have a problem with wealth inequality if it didn't translate to, you know, health inequality, life expectancy inequality, educational inequality, right? It's like if the billionaires want to be billionaires and it doesn't affect the health and well-being of everybody else, all for it, but it does affect the health and well-being.
I want to mention one.
It's a zero-sum game.
Yeah, I want to mention one thing because these meetings on
it is a zero-sum game.
These meetings on Zoom, they give us 1 hour. They give us 60 minutes. So I just want to. It just shuts off.
All right. So why don't we talk about?
Let me just. Okay. I think that I do believe in like Steven Pinker's book, the better angels of our nature. Mm-hmm. I think that is
that recent, Enrique? Is that a recent book?
I think
because he's gotten on a kick that society's always getting better, and I don't know if it's talking about that.
Yeah, it's that, and I do believe it is incrementally getting better. Just talking about education, in the 1950s, 3% of Americans went to school, and our higher education went to college, and it was only the super elite. And then in the 1960s, it turned into like 9%. And in the 70s, it's like 12, 14%. So right now we're at the highest level of people going to school. And
debt.
Of course. Oh, yeah. Well, in the 1950s, you couldn't even borrow money to go to school. You know, so in the 1960s, you couldn't even borrow money to go to school. You just wouldn't go.
I'm just suggesting those things are twinned, maybe. The fact that like we've increased people going to school and the fact that debt, like maybe there's a thing going there hand in hand.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, no.
And you're celebrating people getting higher education. I'm saying yes, but maybe they're only getting higher education as a means to generate wealth for the banking class. You know?
Well, it's not really the banking class. It's the government is guaranteeing those loans. So, and I think that that's really bad because if the government stopped giving loan guarantees, tuitions would drop by 30% overnight.
Totally, but the government doesn't recoup that except in the long term by having an educated population, whereas the people that extend those loans have those loans guaranteed that they will be paid back, right? And that they will accrue interest. So the bank actually profits from that, whereas the government is the stopgap that ensures that the bank will profit from that loan being extended. Correct? So it's like the government is using schools to create a debtor class for their profit. So that the government can then say, look at the Dow, we're doing great.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Going through the roof, right?
I think
it's complicated.
I think that there is a lot of, there are things that happen and they benefit from these things. And then there's also other people that benefit. So it's a culmination of a lot of different things. I don't know, what the perfect line to draw is. I think, we can't cover every single subject, and I'd like to do this again, by the way. I think it's really cool that we can get together and do these things for 60 minutes and then, and then evolve and then think about what we've talked about, as we go on. I think there are people borrowing money to go to college, borrowing money to go to the most expensive colleges, as opposed to living within their means and thinking about, okay, look, I'm going to have to pay this thing back. There's a $10,000 a year school, a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year school. I think that I've got to not go into that kind of debt and let me try to get the best education off of something that I think I can afford, especially if you're going to school for something that is not going to get you a $500,000 a year job. Totally. Why are you going to spend $70,000 a year to go to a school like that? I think that we all really have to make good choices.
There's a whole system that's feeding that, right, Enrique? I don't think it's just a personal choice system. Like you go to schools and their college counselors are not telling people about community college. They're not talking to people about studying engineering. Like they're just funneling people to college. There's a whole thing that isn't just even like media. media, right? Like all media is like, you're going to college, graduating, going to college. Like we're all taught that going to college is an essential aspect of being an American, at the same time as tuitions on all those schools, the cheap ones and the expensive ones, are increasing 400% in 10 years. So there's something, maybe, there's a very interesting post-colonial theorist, Leela Gandhi. I think she's the great granddaughter of Gandhi or whatever. And she made this very interesting point about the Enlightenment, which was that like, it's not a coincidence that at the same time that they were enshrining the rights of man was when they decided that these people were not men at all, right? Like it's not a coincidence that all these great values that we espouse were developed at the same time that the greatest subjugation of a minority racial class in the world ever took place. These things were built together. And I think like we should keep our eyes open when we think about drawing a line. I don't know if it's about drawing a line. It's more about like being suspicious. Like, let's not pretend that the fact that people have more higher education in America now is just a factor of the concern for the well-being of the people and the increasing quality of life.
Definitely not. It's a business.
May celebrate it. It's a business.
Yeah, it's a business, and these schools have $50 billion endowment.
Totally. Steven Pinker talks about the increasing, the improvements of the quality of life all over the world. We should always look at the other side of that in the same way as with the college and higher education thing in America, which there is always another side to it. And that's the other side that reveals that the picture is not exactly as people like Pinker would suggest, because the case that Pinker is making could have been made in some pretty horrible moments in human history and still would have held real, because they're about selective vision. And they're saying like, this is how I measure progress, meritocracy, this is what is good, is that the good rises to the top, and these sort of measurements, whereas other people would measure them by, I don't know, other measurements that maybe we don't even know how to quantify, that aren't about literacy, which are the things that I care about, or health that I care about.
Yeah, we have to understand that there's thousands of pieces of data, and then we cannot process all of it, and we essentially put the data together in order to create the argument that we are interested in prevailing. So it's not so much about right and wrong. It's about, hey, here's an argument that says this is the way the world is going. And I think it's a valid argument. It's the one that I feel is right. So then you get after that, and here's the data to support it. But, at the end of the day, the choices that we make about how we see the world are, to some degree, in my view, going to inform what the results that we get are. So if we're inherently just optimistic and positive and are constantly looking for the good, then we're probably going to get a different type of result than another person who's constantly seeking out what's wrong with something. So it's not even so much the half glass, the glass half full or half empty. It's like, where are we putting our energy, and how are we deciding what to pull out of what we see? Because we have so many choices. And of course, just walking around thinking everything is hunky-dory without recognizing that there's things that are definitely not going well is a type of ignorance that I think could be dangerous.
All right. It says there's less than a minute to our meeting. Is it going to cut us off now?
I think so. Let me see what it says.
I think it's 45, not an hour. Last I checked, it was 45 minutes.
Less than a minute. It says less than a minute left. The last time Ben and I did this, it went on for like an hour and 45 minutes. Is the first time I saw that. The first time I saw that thing.
As Zoom stock goes up, the amount of minutes per meeting goes down.
Well, now they want to charge a subscription fee.
Yeah,
you can always hang up and open and do it again. I mean,
no, that's true. That's true. But yeah, I don't. I think that these. I want to think about all the things that we talked about. I mean, we got so many things going on right now.
We didn't even talk about George Floyd.
It's that's a whole hour, I think. I mean,
all right. Well, maybe we'll do it again.
I don't think there's anybody that thinks that the George Floyd murder is not a horrific.
Of course, I mean nobody's for it.
I don't know. I'm for the murder of George Floyd. Like,
That's not funny.
It's not funny, but.